I will be looking at or exploring what the right balance is between international management and the involvement of fishing communities in the management of Caribbean spiny lobster fisheries. Let me say at the outset, by international management, I'm not speaking necessarily about total international control. I'm more generally speaking about the involvement of international considerations. And so moving on to the next slide. There's some important background information you need to consider. On the screen in the map, you'll see the range for the Caribbean spiny lobster, or what we call crawfish in the Bahamas, as seen on the IUCN's webpage. We have significant fisheries throughout this area, from as far north as Bermuda down to the the northern edge of South America around Venezuela. But a key aspect about their biology that's important for you to understand is that they have a larval duration of 6 to 9 months. That means after the eggs are released or the larvae are hatched, so to speak, they float around for 6 to 9 months. So during that period, the larvae disperse far and wide. And so over the years, if we look through some of the VCAPC documents and CRFM documents, it is postulated that there is one stock or a handful of large stocks. And that leads us to conclude that the management actions of one country affect other countries, because there's a link between the stocks or the populations in each country. Or put another way, the management efforts collectively affect the stock status. And so there are strong biological reasons for international management, or at least strong cooperation in addressing spiny lobster management issues. But there are other reasons too, beyond biology. On the first day, you heard about IUU fishing. In addition to other illegal practices, there's definitely need for cooperation and coordination in addressing those challenges, as you've heard over the last 2 days. When you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, when you look at Target 13.2 that speaks about climate change, I don't need to explain to this group that there's a need for worldwide coordination in addressing climate change that extends to fisheries management matters as well. And as mentioned by Milton on the first day, he mentioned that there are numerous multilateral treaties and other agreements that we must consider. 2 important ones shown on the screen. One is the FAO Code of Conduct for Responsible Fisheries, and the other, as mentioned by Myron just now, the St. George's Declaration on Conservation, Management, and Sustainable Use of the Caribbean Spiny Lobster, which has been around since 2015. And as another speaker mentioned, harmonization is definitely needed for the various reasons given. Sometimes we truly need, or be in our best interest, to harmonize our management measures, especially where there's significant international poaching taking place. So there are a lot of cross-cutting issues between different countries or the different territories where the spiny lobster is distributed. But it would be in the region's best interest to coordinate or utilize international management efforts. So that is very clear. But at the same time, we also need to understand that community involvement is needed. And so the title of this slide is, why should local communities be included in management efforts? When you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, there are some serious matters that need to be addressed. For example, Target 10.2, by 2030, the world has agreed that we need to empower and promote the social, economic, and political inclusion of all, irrespective of age, disability, race, ethnicity, origin, religion, or economic or status or other status. And so consulting communities, involving their considerations in all matters is very important. Also, if you look through the literature, there's been positive change reported when communities have been involved or seriously consulted when it comes on to management of fisheries and natural resources. And it's also very necessary for buy-in and support. It doesn't make sense you come up with these fancy management measures when the persons affected who have to abide by these measures, they have no buy-in or no support. That makes it extremely challenging to implement any measures. And so despite the multitude of agreements, there has been a lack of on-the-ground change as well. If you look through the literature, you'll often see this conclusion. So very little change on the ground happens when you don't have that buy-in and support. And if you understand what's happened in the CRFM region and the 2015 declaration has already been mentioned, I just want to hone in on two specific principles. That's 1F, that specifically states that we have to take into account the interests of small scale and subsistence fishers and promote their participation in the decision-making processes that affect their livelihoods. That only makes sense. You should include them in these processes that affect their livelihoods. In addition, Principle 1G then speaks about ecological knowledge, but I won't go into detail in the interest of time. And so the challenge, which spurred my discussion, or the title of my presentation is, what is that right balance between international management and the involvement of fishing communities? And a number of things have to be considered that they include, for example, there are many commonalities as between the different communities and within the region, but there's also a unique component to each community that has to be considered. A lot of times there's a lack of clear opinion as well. In some regions, I mean, the fishermen are, although you post them for opinions, they're reluctant to share. There's often a mechanism is not in place, and there are inefficient mechanisms. And so that leads us to trying to figure out, how do we know when the balance is achieved given all of these challenges? Also, how do we achieve this balance? And so moving on quickly, there are some things that have been proposed in the region or utilized and that you'll find in the literature. You need support mechanisms at all levels that seek to efficiently include community involvement. Things like international fisherfolk organizations, local fisherfolk organizations, national legislation that mandates that you seek the community's opinions and involvement and buy-in. And if you're an NGO, there might be bylaws, and sometimes some groups just utilize best practices. I heard a speaker mention the utility in having a stakeholder database, and certainly key informants are highly valuable. But ultimately, you do need a two-way flow of information. You need a two-way flow of information from the international arena to the communities, and vice versa, from the communities influencing the international management, suggested management measures. And so this brings me back to, how do we achieve this balance? And so we understand that there are some serious challenges, that there's a level of uniqueness as well. And so I've come full circle. My reason for presenting this slideshow is because I wanted to know what the right balance is between international management and involvement of fishing communities, but also propose that each of us in our various areas of work always ask ourselves this particular question. We know that there's uniqueness and complexities and so forth. There might even be guidelines that we try to abide by, but it would serve us well that each step at the international, the local, even fora like this, we always ask ourselves personally, what is that right balance? Or put more simply, have communities adequately being considered in the work that I'm undertaking right now? So it would serve us well, given the complexities in measuring this balance, of knowing whether we achieve, to always have this at the forefront of our thoughts if we really and truly want to move closer towards obtaining that balance without even knowing exactly what that balance is. And with that, thank you very much for listening.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Gittens. It's a moment for us to do some self or country introspection to see if we really are achieving that balance. It would be very interesting if anyone could comment if they believe they have actually achieved that balance as it relates to management. All right, I see a lot of hand claps and reactions. Do we have anyone that would like to vocalize a comment or a question? Okay, yes, go ahead, Mr. Kong.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Excellent presentation as usual, Lester. I just wanted to put another component into the fray, and that is a level playing field. You talk about communities, of course, you know that different communities, I think perhaps both the geographical community and the working community of fishers. What I find is it don't matter what educational level, what's the scale, whether it be industrial, artisanal, subsistence. Once there is the notion that the playing field is not level, you lose everything. And I think that I don't know how to verbalize that or put that into any other philosophical way or whatever it is, but I think that is a key critical aspect of fisheries management, whether it be international, regional, or local, because this issue of reciprocity and all of that has to come into play. So again, these are my comments on this. Thanks, Chair.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Khan. All right, thanks again, Dr. Gittens. A wonderful presentation. And again, it's much for us to think about.